Hey guys, this is Sean. Sorry for the mess behind me. I'm just moving into a new space here, and so it's a little bit chaotic. But I hope you guys had a great competition and enjoyed all the projects. And I wanted to go ahead and do a quick walkthrough of our mechanical project. For one, just in case you had problems with any particular parts of it, you could see and learn how they were done. Or if you didn't have problems with anything, you could at least see how somebody else approached it, because I don't know about you, but it's always interesting to me to see if somebody else tackles problems the same way I do, or if they've got some other different way of doing it that I might learn from, or that was easier or harder, or heck, maybe you guys send me a tip and say, you know, you really could have done it this way. It would have saved you a bunch of time. But either way, it's kind of a long video because it is a walkthrough, and I am trying to explain as I go, and honestly, I'm kind of trying to remember and make things up as I go too. But feel free to skip through parts you know, and hopefully it helps. Let's get started. Rather than mark up my one nice reference image that I've got, one of the things that I like to do is just do a really simplified sketch of what I'm going to be recreating here, and use that for my measurements. And that simplifies things, keeps me from getting confused while I'm trying to read what I wrote. And that's really about as much as I even need on this thing. What I'm going to do, I'm going to switch colors here so you can see. All I'm going to do is go ahead and just mark out the places that I know I need to get measurements on. I want to go ahead and measure the full width of that. I want to measure how high that is from the point. I'll go ahead and measure from there to the corner. Height of that. Width. Distance from edge. Distance from the top to that. This is at an angle here, so I'm going to go ahead and just measure how far the corner is from the edge of the book there, and how far the corner is from the bottom of the page. And I will most likely, in terms of figuring out how far to tilt this, I will most likely just count down the number of whatever you call them, binder things, and use a relative measurement rather than trying to figure it out with a ruler and having one more thing to slow me down. And finally, I'll go from there to there. And if I need, it's not saying I can't do more measurements as I go, but this is going to get me 90% of the way and speed things up tremendously. Now, I don't have to go measure, put something over here, transfer. I've got everything in place. I can measure my physical copy and then just immediately write down each number. I don't have to go, should I measure that? Should I measure that? And for me, I went ahead and I did one in advance here so I wouldn't waste your time measuring. And this is what I've come up with. And so this is what I'm going to use to recreate on the screen, since it'd be a little bit too hard for me to show you me measuring constantly and going back to the screen. So that's what we're going to work from. Now let's go ahead and go through how this thing was actually built, at least how I chose to build it. As long as the nice thing about design is that as long as you get to the same end result, it doesn't matter one bit if you did it differently than somebody else did. So here we go. This is the actual part of the design that was done in Photoshop. It's really about 95% done in Photoshop. Whenever I've got very highly graphic layouts that don't have a lot of typesetting, that are single page, don't require the consistency of InDesign for character styles, object styles, stuff like that, for me, it's probably a lot faster and easier to do things mostly in Photoshop. I did go ahead and typeset it in InDesign just because I hate doing bulleted lists in Photoshop. But anyway, this is how I'm choosing to start. You could have done this any number of ways, although there are certain things done to the graphics that you will almost certainly have to have done in Photoshop to get them correct, some tonal adjustments and so on and so forth. So anyway, we're going to go ahead and treat what you see on the screen here as my original that we're kind of measuring off of, because it's what I'm going to have to use to reference visually when I'm putting things on the screen. What I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to make a new document that I know I'm going to go ahead and work in RGB because Photoshop is still inherently an RGB environment. And we know we're doing 8 inches by 4.5. That's our final. Now, Photoshop has no sense of margins or bleeds or anything else. And we do need to add a bleed on this. I'm going to show you the easy way to do this in Photoshop without having to do a ton of measuring. You can actually start even further in to do the margins as well, but I'll kind of wrap 2 tips into one here. So I'm going to start with my trim size, okay, my final piece size without the bleed. Okay, I'm going to hit OK. What I'm going to do is go ahead and drag guides to the top, the bottom, the left, and the right. And then all I'm going to do is come into canvas size, which I'm going to you know what, I'm going to use the menus on everything so you can see where I'm going. You either know the shortcuts or you don't. But since I'm on a PC, you're likely on a Mac, that way it doesn't get confusing. Image, canvas size, relative, and I know that my bleeds need to be 1/8 of an inch, which is 0.125. So the total I need to add is 1/4 inch, right? 1/8 and 1/8 is 1/4 to each side. So as long as I'm doing it centered here, we're going to say add a total of 1/4 inch, add a total height of 1/4 inch, go. And now I already have guides in place for my bleeds. Those are my trim lines right there. And I didn't have to do any measuring. Now, like I said, I could have done this just as easily starting at my safe area size, just in my margin size, but I'm going to wrap one more tip in here, and we're going to use the rectangular marquee tool, but under style, we're going to change it to fixed size, and we'll simply change it to 0.25 inches. And that way, no matter what I do, I can't make anything bigger than 1/4 inch square. And I'll drag that into a corner, snap, snap with my guides, drag it into the bottom right corner, snap, and snap with my guides. And now because I don't use this unless I don't do it with fixed size unless I'm doing something exactly like this, and Photoshop remembers things longer than I do, I'm going to make sure I change this back to normal so I don't forget in the future and frustrate myself. All right, so now I have my template set up. And while I don't know at this point whether I have given you guys a template to start from, so if I didn't, this is how you would set the thing up. If you want quick center lines on anything, you can also simply do this. You can go View, New Guide, say 50% vertical, View, New Guide, 50% horizontal. In this particular layout, there is nothing that is centered on the page vertically or horizontally. And so those 2 guides to me in this case are useless. And I'm going to be using enough guides for measuring things and marking things that I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those 2 so they don't mess things up later on. The absolute most important thing to remember whenever you're going through building this is that you are measuring on your printed copy, okay? If your printed copy is already trimmed down, then you need to make sure that anything you measure in Photoshop is coming from the edge of your trim line, not all the way from the edge. If you are measuring from a copy that shows the bleed, and again, I don't know which one you've been given, then make sure but so don't get the 2 confused, because I can tell you that I kept getting them confused whenever I was recreating this for this video and had to go back and do my work over again a couple of times. So anyway, just keep that in mind as we go. Looking back here, let's go ahead and take a look at what our source material is that we're starting with, okay? What I see in here is our notebook, our tape, this band behind it, our photo, some kind of background thing, and maybe a couple of logos. What we actually have, it looks like, are a background image the notepad is blank, so I'm going to have to go ahead and add everything to the notepad. This must be the red. Okay, I'll do away with that. This is the red paper, so I know I need to colorize that somehow. I have my sketch and this that both go onto the notepad. There's my logo for the top left corner, and there's our photo. It doesn't have a border, so I have to put some kind of a border on it. That's what I'm working with. So what I'm going to go ahead and do for starters is drag this thing into my document here. And I'm going to come over here and take a look and see. Okay, I can't really see how many things are being shown. So I'm just going to go ahead and scale it up to the point where normally I would go ahead and count how many slats in the wood are visible. Oops, okay, I'll have to drag it in again. I would simply count how many slats, and that's how I would measure how tall to make this thing. But it's blurred out. Maybe some other stuff's been done to it. I don't know. So I'm just going to have to guess, and the upside to this is that nobody else is going to be able to tell either. So we'll go ahead and drag this back in here, and I'll scale it up to where it covers sufficiently. Because it's blurred out, I'm scaling it beyond the bounds of the document a little bit. That way I won't end up with some white fringe on my edges. Okay. Now, looking from here to here, clearly we've got some blur. This is placed as a smart object, so I can go ahead and come in here and just put some kind of Gaussian blur on it for starters. And I can always come back and edit it if I don't like it later on. So I'm going to start with about 13 or 14. That looks roughly like what I'm seeing there. I can still see some of the lines. I'm going to call it good. Here's the deal. You're recreating this thing on a timeline. I could go back and forth and fuss on this thing forever and never be happy with just the blur itself and waste 15 minutes. I'm going to get it roughly blurred. I'm going to get everything roughly in place. And then in whatever time I have left over, I'm going to come back and do all my fine tuning. Wood texture is in there. Now, I have my notepad to go in here next. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and take a quick look at this. And I realized I jumped the gun earlier whenever I went ahead and I put in my 1/4 inch margins because I didn't tell you that we had 1/4 inch margins. What I did do, though, was when I was measuring everything, top edge was a 1/4 inch. To the left was a 1/4 inch. Bottom was a 1/4 inch. Even though the right-hand side doesn't really adhere to margins, the document's got 1/4 inch margins, so call it good, be done with it. So, notepad is, in my measurements, 3.55 wide and 1/2 inch from the top of the screen. Okay? So what I'll do is, there's my 1/2 inch from the top. I'm going to go ahead and come down another 1/2 inch. Or sorry, there's a 1/4 inch from the top. There's another 1/2 inch. 1/4 inch. So that's a total of 1/2 inch from the top. I can see there in my info palette. Sorry, that was not said very well. That's where the top corner of my notepad's going to go. Okay. Drag my notepad in here. While I'm placing it, I'm going to come up here to the width and the height, lock the two of them together. I measured it at 3.55 inches. It wants to do it in percentage, but my ruler is already in inches. If yours isn't, I'd go ahead and switch it. And I'm going to put in 3.55 IN. Hit enter again, done. Okay, there's that top corner, and I know that that is already in place. I know that there's some kind of tilt to this. Now, what I can see is that the right-hand corner is there's a lot of ways I could do this, but the right-hand corner is 0.1 inches from the edge. And I can see right here that wherever it lands on the bottom comes up to the my margin. okay? So what I'm likely going to do is come over here. I'm going to get rid of this guide so I don't clutter things up as I go. I'm going to come back to fixed size. Only thing I care about is the width, because that's what I'm measuring here. There's 0.1 from, remember, my trim edge. That's what I measured from. I'm going to toss a guide there temporarily. Move that over roughly. Free transform. Stick that guy on the corner. Okay, I'm taking my center point, moving it to the corner. Rotate it out until I am even with the margin. And we're pretty much good right there. Okay, notepad is now in place. I have this big bar going all the way across. The bottom edge is even with my margins. I measured that out on my document earlier. The top edge, I didn't measure how tall the bar was. I measured how tall it was from the top edge. Why? Because it's what I chose to do at the time. Don't second guess yourself. Mine was 1.9, so fixed size. Don't really care about the width, I care about the height. 1.9 inches. Boom. There. Guide. When I originally designed this, to be completely honest, I just threw a rough mask onto the paper texture that was the size I wanted to. In reality, when I'm designing, if I want something to be a lot more flexible in my design, then I'll go ahead and just take a big shape tool and make a big rectangle or whatever shape I need to. Go ahead and drop this back below the sketchbook. Okay, that's the size of my bar. There's my paper. Throw the paper on top of there. Once again, we don't really have anything to tell us what part of the paper is or isn't being used. If we really care, we can look and see that there's a big dark mark there and a smaller dark mark about halfway up. We could kind of, I mean, if we really cared. This is one of those things that nobody would notice if you did it. So we're going to go ahead and just call that good. And the way we make this only stick on top of the rectangle is with a clipping group, right? So that one is either, I don't usually use the right click menu here. Is there a clipping group here? No. Layer. I'll just tell you the shortcut for it. Okay. If you do Control-Alt-G, Command-Option-G, it will clip the top layer to the bottom layer. If you instead hold Alt or Option, put your mouse between the two layers, you'll see the cursor changes. And if you click then, it will clip the top layer to the bottom layer. What that lets you do, if you're not familiar with this already, is if you move the bottom layer around, you will basically move your glue. Okay? If you move your top layer around, you will only ever see it where there's glue for it to stick to. Really, really handy way of dropping something in place. Now, I do not have, you will have been given the value for the red in here. I don't have that handy. So you can do this a number of different ways. I'm going to use a layer style for it. And I'm just going to double click on my paper texture. Color overlay. Oh, I already have my color in there. And so the last thing I made was this thing, so a lot of the settings are still in there. When I put my color overlay on there, it takes off all my texture. Simply changing that to one of our darken blending modes, okay, would get us the look that we want. If you're not familiar with a lot of these, then flip through them and you can find which one kind of matches the look you're going for. In this case, it happens it was multiply. Oops, multiply. And then it's hard to see, but I did actually put a little gradient overlay on this one as well, just to darken from that edge. In this case, it was black to white. about 40%, again, set to multiply, because otherwise it would just do a solid black to white. The color overlay is above the gradient, which is why my black to white gradient is not showing as black to white, it's showing red to black. It's because the color overlay is going over the top of it, and that multiply blending mode is turning the white into red. But anyway, mine is set to multiply, and like I said, about 40%. Okay. And speaking of which, there is a bit of a shadow around both that and around the notepad. So let's toss a shadow on the sketchbook. Drop shadow. Scale it up a little bit. This is one where there is so much texture behind it that all I'm trying to do, all I was trying to do here was create a separation between the two. I'm not trying to really make it look like a shadow. It's just creating a bit of separation. And there's so much texture, no one's going to be able to tell if you got it exactly right. As long as you got it in the ballpark, you're good. We're going to call that good there. And I'm actually going to take this drop shadow right here. I'm going to Alt or Option drag that drop shadow onto my rectangle and apply the exact same shadow there that I had from my sketchbook. Okay, or you could just open up that one and drop it, whatever. Does not matter, 6-1 does none of the other, right? Good. Logo. I measured my logo at 2¼ inches wide. Looking at my source, my logo is in black. I can do one of two things. I can place it as a smart object. I can use, I'll show you both ways real quick. I can drop it onto the right document. I can drop it in here, size it to 2.25 inches. I know it goes up like that. I could take it and just toss a color overlay of solid white on top of it and call it done. If I was not using Photoshop for this, I would almost definitely have to simply open the thing in Illustrator, because it is vector, and because it's such a simple graphic, there is no problem whatsoever with just copying and pasting the shapes directly into Photoshop. Illustrator you wouldn't need to, or InDesign, and just have them exist as shapes in there that you can then colorize however you want. Does not matter one bit. One thing I'm noticing though is that the background here is way, way darker than what I'm seeing here. So above my wood texture, I'm going to go ahead and just add a quick levels or curves adjustment. And I'm going to darken things up a hair. Now with a competition, I know, or judges are going to know, that you're working from a reproduction, which means that color may not be absolutely perfect. Your monitor calibration may not be perfect. What they're going to be looking for is that you noticed something and that you adjusted it to the best of your ability. And as long as it looks like you were going in the right direction, we probably gave you full marks on it. Because who knows, maybe your monitor was set darker or lighter and it looked like you were adjusting it the way your printout was. Maybe your printout came out off. I don't know. I just need to know that you saw it and you made that adjustment. You made some adjustment to try and accomplish that. Now this one does happen to have a, you can see the edges are darkened in a little bit. It does actually have a vignette. It is so subtle that I don't even know if it would show up on a printout. And to that effect, if it wasn't there, I would probably not cry foul for anybody. The easy way to do that is to come here under shadow and highlight. No, not shadow and highlight. It is lens correction. And what I can do is come over here to custom and do vignette. That's lighter. There we go, vignette, darken. And if I want to creep it in or out, I can change my midpoint there. There's an easy, cheesy way to add a quick vignette to an image, just basically misusing the lens correction filter. Okay, so now there's my vignette. That almost looks a bit heavy-handed now that now that's on there, so I'm going to open my levels back up and back off some of my darkening a little bit. And I may even open that lens correction back up. Take the amount down a little bit. But, like I told you earlier, that's something you should probably wait until the very end to do, and I just went against my own rule, so sorry about that. Anyway, almost there. We have just a couple elements left. We have photo, we have the tape, and we have the stuff in the sketch pad. And it's not super, super difficult, so hang tight here. I don't have a good judgment on the photo, so here's what I'm going to do. I know that the left-hand edge on the photo... Ooh, actually I did not measure how far the left-hand edge was from here. So that's the point where I would go back and just say, you know what, I'm going to measure it on my document. It is 2.5 inches from the left-hand edge. So I'll go ahead and make myself a quick 2.5 inch. Ooh, I measured from the wrong thing. I did. See, that's why you got to be careful. I measured all the way from the trim, or all the way from the bleed. There we go. It is 2.39-ish. From there, boom, done. Drop in photo. That is higher up in the stack than I want. It needs to go behind the sketchbook, above the paper. There we go. All right. What I'm actually going to do here is 1.7 inch. Oops, 1.7 inches is how high I measured from the bottom for that corner. So I know that the corner of my image goes there. Okay. I also know that it tilts up to the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, the 13th little bendy thing, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 right there. That guy, 2 whole ones up from where he's at. So there, put it in the corner, tilt it up to that, and I know that the feet are, let's see where my feet are. My feet rest right on my trim line. And so there's my foot, right on the trim line. That should be good. So this is I referenced my corner point. Okay. I measured from the left, I measured up from the bottom, put the corner point. I used relative location to tilt it. Okay. I could have also simply measured from the top to the top edge here. That would have worked too. I need some kind of a border. You could measure your, you could try and measure the thing, or you could look and see that the border comes just up to, it looks like a little dark circle on there. There's that dark circle right there. if I take this, I do stroke, inside stroke, and I simply take this thing up, up, up until it almost completely covers that, just like before, okay, just like in our reference. And it's really a slightly off-white color. If it ends up white, it's not the end of the world. Again, using relative things in your image rather than trying to measure every single thing. All right. So now we have that. There is, it looks like, a shadow on that as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab that same drop shadow from the bar. I can't visually tell much of a difference, so that works for me. I will also go ahead and drag that same drop shadow, just alt dragging or option dragging up to Design Dad, although I forgot that it included a stroke, which I'll take off. Oh, it got rid of my color overlay. Wasn't paying attention. Sorry, folks. It happens. Okay, we are most of the way there. And the one thing we have not done so far, and shame on all of us for it, is save our freaking document. Because one goof, one glitch, and all the work you just did, gone. Save. I'll go ahead and call mine. You're supposed to call yours your contestant number. I'm just going to call mine work in progress so I know. I'll make my contestant number will be 1. There we go. I'm contestant number 1. All right. Last bits. I have a piece of tape that goes across there. I measured my tape at 0.625 inches tall. It's lined up with the bottom edge of the thing. So, tape. Lock my proportions again. 0.625. Oh, not width. I goofed. Yep, not width. 0.625 inches tall. And I can't tell from this whether that's the full width of things or not, so I'm not even trying to do it by its width. There could be this much hanging off over the end. There could be this much hanging off over the end. I don't know. What I do know is the height, though. And I'll be completely honest here. If you simply look at this thing, rather than me trying to measure the exact width on things, there's kind of a dark bar coming down from about here to about there. The edge of this tape hits right in the middle of it. The little fringe right there hits right before it. That's all I'm going to do, is simply take this piece of tape, scoot it over until it is right in the middle of that darkened bar, and call that within a margin of error for a manual ruler. Yep. And we're going to go ahead and toss the drop shadow. Now in this case, that drop shadow looks way too big. So this time I'm not going to reuse it exactly. I'll come over here and I will take the size down and the opacity down until it looks about right. Again, tweak later, get things roughly in place now. All right, here's the important stuff. Rather than trying to place a whole bunch of elements on this notepad and get them all the same angle matching the angle that I turned this thing, instead, I'm going to simply open that sketchbook smart object and place everything in here and save it as part of the smart object. That way, it'll automatically be transformed, rotated, and everything else when it goes back into the document. Again, rather than doing a whole bunch of super careful measuring, If you look, the left-hand edge of the sketchy lines stops right on that dark line that runs down the paper. The right-hand edge of the sketchy lines is right there at the dark of the paper. This right here runs right up to about the bottom edge of that hole in the paper. So there's that sketch. Drop it in here. Now, what do we know that will make a white background on something disappear and basically apply what is on the document to what's below it? Blending mode, right? And in this case, again, one of our darkened ones, multiply could work. I happened to use linear burn because I liked it looking it was a little bit more severe and I liked the look. Doesn't matter, probably can't tell the difference as long as you know that these are what you would do to make something like that happen. And free transform. I'm going to go ahead and sketchy lines up to the dark part of the bar. Sketchy lines to the dark edge there. Take the top up to right about that. Done. Okay. The little logo bug goes from the bottom edge of that to about the bottom edge of that and stops with the inside of the D at the edge of that bar. I'm not saying, oh no, don't measure this stuff, but so there's that. Oops. I said the bottom edge of the sketchy stuff, didn't I? And the D goes to there. Now, that's not the same color as the rest of the stuff. I believe I gave you guys a color on it. That color happened to have come from the darkest parts of that. So I'm going to go ahead and do color overlay normal, and that way because it won't do anything to black. Multiply won't do anything to black. I want it to overwrite the color of that, and then I'll set this thing to, well, linear burn like the other one was. And finally, we have this little project number, which, yeah, go ahead and measure it. I didn't measure this right now. I'm going to go ahead and again go largely by the eyeballing. I've got the second 0 is lined up with the dark edge, and the P starts just beyond that dark splotch right there. So once again, relative stuff to the rescue. And I'm going to use that same color I just used for that. The font, again, I do already have this set from earlier. I'm going to go ahead and change this just so it won't be quite, but it is covered by your grace. That should be listed on your document. And project number 0001. Oh, now why is this so small? Well, because I'm doing this within the Smart object. Even though it's 12 point relative to the size in the final document, it is not 12 point relative to the size in here. But like I said, we had the R going to there, right? The R was about with that dark splotch there. The second O is about even with that. And this is about as far down as it is in from the right. Set to linear burn. I'm going to show you a very quickie little trick that I like. I did actually do this a tiny bit on here. I do not expect anyone to get it. If you do, super cool. But when I have something like this that I want to not look quite so pristine, one of my favorite little tricks is blend if. And so on this Design Dad logo, I'm going to double click. And just right here in the blending options, here's blend if. And this says blend if underlying layer is a certain darkness or a certain lightness. If I drag from the right, then it starts to disappear when it hits a certain brightness there. If I drag from the left, it disappears with the dark parts first. What I'm going to do is take the dark until I get the first couple little specks. Then I'm going to hold Alt or Option and split that and drag it a bit further to the right. And I get a little built-in distress. I'm going to take the right-hand side, drag it until I get a couple little specks, back it off, hold Alt or Option, split that arrow, add a bit of distress. So now it's a little bit worn, and the cool thing is it would be that way. It's not a mask. It's doing it entirely based on where it's at in the picture. Okay, that's blend if. It's really, really handy. And the cool thing is it's a part of a layer style, so I can simply right click that, copy layer style, come up here to project, paste layer style, and I get that same little bit of worn out, except if that looks a little bit too much, I can just open it back up, grab the edge of my dark arrow, bring some of that back. Maybe I go ahead and bring the light one up a little bit more. Okay. Save. Oh, okay, wait a second. All right, so this happens. This was originally a PNG file. And I'm normally a huge advocate of saving things as a PSD before you place them because it gives you a lot more options. And this is what we ran into right here. I completely forgot about it. PNGs don't support layers, so I can't add a bunch of layers on here and save it back to the document. So here's what I can do instead. File, save as. Now I'm going to have to dig back through and find my files because contests, district, mechanical, source. Okay, I'm going to call it sketchbook layers. I'm going to save it and I'm going to close it, and it will not be in this document. Don't worry. With that sketchbook layer selected still, not literally with a tool, just with it selected in the layers palette. Layer, smart objects, replace contents. Find your sketchbook layers, hit place. Boom, done. And then finally, we just need to add, again, and covered by your grace, this is just in black because it's a Sharpie. And this says, what does it say? It says coffee can mini forge, and it is big enough to go from the right hand edge of the double D to the edge of the foot. So, coffee can mini forge. Move it up here so I can see where I'm scaling it from there to there. Center it on there. And now we'll see if that is not horrible for a quick run through. And that would be enough to get you darn near perfect marks on your scoring. Okay? So I'll go ahead and save this. And honestly, I'm not going to run through the part in InDesign right now. Because it's simply making two text boxes. There's no text wrap whatsoever. It is just matching the font. I may change my mind if you see something tacked on here in a few seconds. Then you'll know. But this is a quick way through on recreating it. Where's my time recording? How long have I been going here? Okay, so we went through this with me talking through all of it in 40 minutes. Okay, assume it took me 5 to get all my measurements down. And so that's 45 minutes. You have an hour and 45 minutes to recreate this. Add 15 minutes to add your text in in InDesign, and you should have plenty of time. But either way, I hope that if you had trouble with any of these parts during the competition, that this helped out and gave you some ideas for how to do some of those parts in the future. And if you did fine in all of it in the competition, then hopefully it was at least somewhat interesting seeing how somebody else approached the same thing to find out if they did it the same way as you or a different way. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this. I hope it helped. And I wish you all retroactively the best of luck in the competition. And talk to you later.